James Courtney knew it was going to be a bad flight the moment he saw the woman who was going to be sitting next to him. She was huge. How on earth was he going to travel comfortably with her sitting next to him? The woman sat down, and as she buckled her seatbelt, her elbow jabbed at James. "Watch it," James yelled angrily at her, and she turned towards him. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she cried. "Please excuse me." "Excuse you?" asked James, mockingly. "Or excuse the 3,000 donuts you ate to get to that size?" The woman gasped at him in shock, and James saw that she was pretty young and had a sweet face, a weak face. It encouraged him to sneer. "Lady, when you travel, you need to book 2 seats." The woman's eyes filled with tears, but James was on a roll, especially when he noticed that her clothes were cheap and old-fashioned, and her shoes were very worn. James' words hung heavy in the air, casting a shadow of shame over the woman beside him. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and click the notification bell for more amazing stories. She turned her face away, seeking solace in the view outside the window, but her reflection betrayed the tears streaming down her cheeks. Regret gnawed at James as he witnessed the devastating effect of his callous remarks. He realized that his attempts at humor had only served to inflict pain and humiliation upon someone who had done him no harm. Feeling a twinge of guilt gnawing at his conscience, James attempted to salvage the situation by offering a misguided solution. "Listen," he began, his voice tinged with awkwardness. "I have a friend who runs a clinic down in Mexico. I'm sure he'd give you a liposuction mucho cheapo." The woman's sobs intensified, her shoulders shaking with the weight of her emotions. James recoiled inwardly, realizing the extent of the hurt he had caused with his thoughtless words. Yet, despite the turmoil roiling within him, James remained ensnared by his own self-interest. When the flight attendant appeared with the drinks cart, he seized upon the opportunity to drown his discomfort in alcohol, requesting a martini with a false air of nonchalance. As he sipped on his drink, James couldn't shake the nagging sense of unease that clung to him like a stubborn shadow. He knew that he had crossed a line, betraying the fundamental principle of empathy and compassion that should govern human interaction. But it wasn't until he saw the woman's tear-streaked face reflected in the window that the full weight of his actions crashed down upon him. In that moment, James realized that he had allowed his own insecurities and prejudices to blind him to the inherent dignity and worth of his fellow human being. With a heavy heart, James resolved to confront his own shortcomings and strive for redemption. He knew that true remorse required more than empty apologies. It demanded genuine introspection and a commitment to change. And so, as the plane hurtled through the sky towards its destination, James vowed to embark on a journey of self-discovery and growth. He knew that it wouldn't be easy, but he also knew that it was a journey worth taking for the sake of his own humanity and the well-being of those around him. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. Shaken, not stirred, he told the pretty flight attendant in his best James Bond voice, then added, "I don't know what Moby Dick here will drink." The pretty attendant pressed her lips together tightly and threw him a disapproving glance. Then she addressed the woman next to her. "Ma'am, would you like anything to drink?" The woman nodded and wiped at her eyes. "Yes, please, a Diet Coke." James scoffed. "Don't you think it's a bit late in the game for a Diet Coke?" Both the flight attendant and the woman ignored him, but James felt a little glow when he realized he'd upset them both. He lay back and nibbled on an olive and sipped on his martini while the woman next to him sipped her Diet Coke. He realized with a shudder that she'd have to go to the bathroom sooner or later and would be squeezing past him. Not long after he'd had his last sip, the flight attendant came along with dinner. She set a pretty tray in front of him and another in front of his fellow passenger. "Are you sure that will be enough?" James asked the flight attendant, because I think it would take a village to feed this lady. The flight attendant ignored him and went on to serve the other passengers in first class. That was rude of her, wasn't it? James asked the woman sitting next to him. I think I'll complain about her. But his fellow passenger ignored him too, and so James dug into the truly excellent dinner. He was sipping the last of his wine when the flight attendant came back, and this time she was all smiles. Excuse me, she said. The captain is a huge fan, and he'd love to invite you up to the cockpit. James was startled, and then saw that the flight attendant was talking to the big woman next to him, who was smiling and blushing and nodding. This meant that James had to get up and let her by. The flight attendant led the woman away, and James sat back down. He thought that he was going to be sending off quite a few unpleasant emails to the company's management about service and conditions in first class on their flights. He was mentally composing some prime rants when the captain's voice came over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a celebrity among us. If you are fans of I Love Opera, like me, you will recognize the voice. A lovely voice filled the cabin, singing a few bars from a famous aria, and the passengers all started clapping and commenting excitedly among themselves. That's right, the captain said. It's the lovely Miss Allison Jones, and she's flying with us to do a charity concert for world hunger. The whole plane erupted into applause, and James cringed. Then the flight attendant came over. Listen up, Buster, she said in a cold, hard voice.
I don't care how many millions you have. If you upset that girl again, I'm putting you in economy.
James opened his mouth to protest and caught the glint in the flight attendant's eye. I'm sorry, he mumbled. It's not me you have to apologize to, she said. A while later, the big woman, Allison Jones, was back, smiling and signing autographs for the other passengers. James jumped to his feet to allow her to take her seat. Listen, he said with his most charming smile. I'm sorry if I was a little rude. I had no idea who you were. Allison turned to look at him, and James saw that she had the most beautiful eyes. It doesn't matter who I am. You shouldn't treat people like that, ever. And besides, you're not sorry. Would you even be apologizing if I wasn't semi-famous? You know, I can't help my weight, but you can change your attitude. Stop judging people. James shut his mouth and sank back into his seat and didn't say another word until they landed in Portland. Thanks for tuning in to Spread Channel. Until next time, keep your imagination soaring.